like drinking out of a fire hose right now. In this month of January, it is the 23rd of January, 2025, in the year of our Lord. And I am happy to be with you here on RickCast in the sea of vapid and pompous podcasts while you're watching another one. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out with me. If you are on YouTube or on Rumble, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, do all the fun things to help the show grow. It is always an honor for you guys to be hanging out with me because there's tons of options out there, especially this time of night. So for you to take the time to hang out with me, I am always appreciative of it. Couple quick things that I want to plug, because that's what we do here on social media, is we pretty much shill for ourselves, because if we don't, who's going to? First one up is in a couple weeks, less than 3. I'm going to be the Masters of Ceremonies at the 15th Annual Carolina Men's Conference of the Carolinas, which is actually the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas. Eventually, I'm going to promote this thing correctly. February 8th, 2025, I will be the MC along with the Bishop of Charleston, John Frankman, Robin Anthony of Avoiding Babylon, John Edwards, who is from Catholics for Rednecks on the Instagrams and other places, and Enoch, who will be performing and will be speaking as well. It will be a great time. I would love to see you there. If you're in the mid-Atlantic area, there is still time for you to get tickets, and I hope you do. And you can hang out with us. It will always be a good time. And when last year, it's a great time. Now that I'm a part of it, it's going to be even better. Second thing, if you like books, my book, The Armed Catholic, The Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense, is available at Amazon.com or at my website, thearmedcatholic.com, because I am the founder of L1121 Strategies, for those of you who know your Bible, the only Catholic Pro 2A group in the country, specializing in bringing a firearms training with a Catholic focus to the masses. If you want more information on that, you can always hit me up, thearmedcatholic.com. With that out of the way, it is a big deal tonight on RickCast, because we actually are having someone join us tonight, and I'm honored to have him on, because he took time out of his busy schedule to come hang out with me, the one and only Brian Nichols. Sir, good evening. Thank you for joining me.
What's up, Rick? How you doing?
I am honored to have you, sir. I'm great. I mean, you're here with me. We get to talk about the news, try to parse out whatever we can in this avalanche of news that Trump just kind of dumps all over us, which is fine. It's better than being bored.
To say the least. I don't think we're going to be bored over the next 4 years at all, Rick. And as somebody who's in the podcasting world myself, I think we're going to have a lot of content to dig through for at least up until 2028, I'm guessing, and beyond.
Yeah, just depending. Well, let's just get into the before we get into the hot takes and everything. If you would like to take just a second to tell anybody in our audience who wouldn't know who you are, what do you do, and what is your focus on your podcast?
Yeah, I'm a guy who yells at a microphone for fun. No, I am the host of the Brian Nichols Show. We originally started out much like most liberty-based shows. We were having conversations with other libertarians and other liberty folk, and we were more or less talking about why it was so great to be a libertarian. I realized very quickly that only goes so far, and I started to really think about where can I add some value to this greater movement. And as a sales guy by trade, I'm a sales executive in the greater tech space. I said a lot of the stuff that I teach my sales teams when I'm going out and coaching and doing enablement sessions with them, it's the same stuff that we need to use in the world of politics. So 2019, we took a hard turn towards teaching folks how to sell liberty. And ever since then, I mean, that's really been the vision, right? Help people understand how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. And with that, leave folks educated, enlightened, and informed. Do around 3 episodes a week. We'll do guest interviews like what we're doing here today. We'll have, folks from all across the political spectrum and all across pretty much all the different hats you can wear, whether you're an entrepreneur, an economist, or just somebody out there doing some new things that are helping build solutions to help solve the problems we see out there in the world. We'll do a week in review episode. We're covering some of the top news, which we're also going to do today. And then I'll do a little segment called Brian's Briefings, just, get the stuff off my chest that's been building up over a week or so. But yeah, other than that, you can find me on social media at B Nichols Liberty. You can learn more about the Brian Nichols Show at briannicholsshow.com.
That's excellent. And I like the concept you have, because if you've ever been in sales, and everybody should at least in one time in their life, you understand that everything in life, and it's not a jaded view, but everything is a sales job. Pretty much your daily interactions is you selling whatever it is, yourself, a product, your whatever. And conservatives, I mean, I'm just a Catholic who happens to identify with conservatives because liberals are way off the cliff and there's no way to identify. So the ideas of the Conservative Party are more in line with what I have, and they're terrible at packaging and selling it. Usually their ideas win when people have the ability to listen to them fleshed out, but conservatives are terrible, Brian, at packaging them and selling them. So the fact that you're actually bringing that service and saying, yes, you can talk about lower taxes and freedom, but guess what? Those are great platitudes that are surface level, and they don't hit emotion. They don't hit the everyday issues. They don't hit the things that people actually care about, which is one of the reasons why I think Trump has actually been successful, because he's been able to at least break through that. Whatever you might like him, don't like him, he has a way to relate that, just because he is a salesman, right? Yep. In construction, he's a salesman. He knows how to sell his ideas. So I think it's a wonderful idea that more politicians try to emulate, like Carrie Lake. She tries to emulate his tone and how he acts, and not his sales pitch. And I think a lot of people miss that it's how he sells it, not how he talks. And that's why a lot of people fail, if it makes sense, at trying to be a Trump light.
Well, and I'll just piggyback on that a little bit more. It's not even so much just what Trump does from a sales perspective. It's also that coupled with, and this is one of the most important parts of sales, and it's not something I can really teach, right? And it's something that you don't, I mean, Trump, I'm sure, did not learn this from somebody teaching him. It's just him, and that is authenticity, right? Yep. In my day job, I'm talking to like literally folks every single day who are out there selling very advanced technology solutions. And the biggest differentiator from the folks who are successful and the folks who aren't is if they're authentic in their go-to-market approach. If you go in pretending to be something that you're not, it's not going to land. And people can smell that a mile away. In the sales world, we call it commission breath, right? When you're just going in, you're trying to present yourself in any way you can to get that deal over the finish line. The prospect can point that out in a heartbeat. So being authentic, and again, you hit the nail on the head, right? Meeting people where they're at on the issues they care about. Like that is one of our little slogans we have here in the Brian Nichols Show, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. People don't care about the things you care about. They care about the things they care about. So it's on us to understand what they actually care about. We do that by asking questions and also identifying core markets that we already have some commonalities with, who are what we consider to be an ideal customer persona, or in the world of politics, an ideal voter persona, and stop wasting your time trying to get people to buy what you're selling when they're not even in the marketplace, right? Again, lead with understanding who is the right person to talk to, be your authentic self, and lead with value. And that value specifically is how you're helping solve a problem that person's facing, whether in their lives or what have you.
And that's fantastic. It really is. And I've had a couple sales jobs. Some I were good at, some I weren't. And the authenticity that you talk about comes from belief. Yes. If you don't believe in the product, when I was a salesman at Radio Shack, some of you don't know what that is, but that was a store once upon a time.
We used to buy electronics in a store, folks, believe it or not.
Yeah, you went to a store that specialized in batteries. Just understand that was their selling point. I was a terrible salesman at Radio Shack. I'm like, yeah, it's a stereo. Buy it if you want. When I was selling, because I'm a self-defense guy, I'm a guy who believes in your right to keep and bear arms. When I was selling self-defense insurance for U.S. For Law Shield, I was one of the best they had because I believed in it. And I was like, this service you need. And that authenticity came there. And I think it's a great point of view you're going to bring to our topics tonight, because, a lot of people are just really caught up in the Trump ecstasy, that I'm going to call it, that this relief that we've had after 4 years of Joe Biden and just seeing Trump do all these things to undo it. However, I'm trying to warn people, like, hey, you might want to calm down. It's great that these things are happening, but the precedent being set and so forth. Let's just jump into it. And speaking of which, you think that will be done in 2028? Not if Andy Briggs gets his way, because he's just put in an amendment to give Trump a third term. Breaking from Randy, and I didn't give this to you in the prep. I sent some stuff over to Brian to let him know. This one just dropped. I figured we could literally just hot take this one. The fact that
it's dumb. It's a dumb idea.
That's it. Go.
Yeah, no, it's a dumb idea, right? We talk about like not giving your competition ammunition. This is giving your competition ammunition, right? Like, you remember how folks just jumped on board with what's it, the official name, like the Roman salute, which is obviously the Hitler salute, right? And Elon Musk, like, my heart goes out to you, and they just went ballistic for that. that's because you're giving them red meat. And this is nothing more than red meat. So we have an obligation to not create unforced errors. And this is nothing more than an unforced error.
The Trump worship, and it is a cult of personality behind him. And it's because he brings a level of winning that conservatives have never seen. So of course there's going to be this false idol that he's become, not on his own volition. I mean, the guy does have a golden toilet seat, but I don't think it's the same thing. But conservatives are just so desperate to keep him around, almost, Brian, the way that liberals didn't want to see Obama go, because he had that same impact on the public and on the party and all these other things. But the fact is, and I joke, if you want to, just make him a king at this point, because that's what you guys are begging for. If you're going to be begging for him to stay a third term or all these other things, just put an amendment in the Constitution, especially with 200 executive orders or whatever he's doing. He's acting like a king at this point. So you might as well just give him the flowers and make him that, and just get rid of the whole democracy republic stuff that both sides, tend to pretend that they want. And secondly, what's the point in getting a guy like JD Drew, who's in his 40s? He's a younger guy who's supposed to bring on that technically.
JD you mean Vance?
Oh, I just quoted. I think I just said the Red Sox outfielder. I was talking about baseball.
Yeah, I was like, JD Drew, who's that?
JD Drew. He was a great left fielder, and now he's the vice president. So he had a really good career. JD Vance. What's the point of getting JD Vance, a guy who's supposedly young, energetic, and is fresh with all these ideas, if you're just going to be like, keep Trump? Because eventually Trump's going to turn into Biden, because Father Time always wins. And this idea of just trying to hold on is completely opposite of what conservatives and the Conservative Party need to be doing right now.
Absolutely. And just to address kind of how we got here, right? This is the inevitable outcome of the continuation of creating an imperial presidency. Back when I was in college, I had a professor, and he actually wrote a book on this, which was the idea of how we had seen over decades after decades, specifically going back to folks like your Abraham Lincolns, up to Teddy Roosevelt, up to FDR, and then to where we were at the time when he was writing the book with Obama being president. You saw this continuation of accumulation of power for that executive type of persona. And this is where we are today, right? In 2025, we have only watched that accumulation of executive power continue to grow more and more. And we see it with the government agencies out there, like the FDA, the EPA, the NIH, all those different entities, FBI, CIA, and they all report to one individual, technically, right? And that is the executive. But for the most part, those entities that have been created just go out and do their own thing, and they're only governed by that individual in power. In this case, it's Trump. So yeah, when you look at how we've gotten to where we are today, it's almost a no-brainer that this is the inevitable outcome of people wanting to say, okay, well, we got the dude in office. That's the guy we need. Let's give him the power we need, which again is the same mentality that a lot of folks had with Biden, with Trump back in 2016, and candidly they had with Obama for his entire 8-year term. So it's a both sides thing. I know folks are like, oh no, both sides, but like it's the truth. We're seeing this happen from both sides, with the Democrats and Republicans, and it's the pendulum, right? When the pendulum swings one way, it inevitably will swing back to the other. But right now, it feels like we're just pushing it back and forth. Who can push it harder and who can push it faster? And yeah, man, I'm not too hot on seeing where this particular story would end up, but hopefully it ends before it begins, because this is just a bad idea from Congressman Briggs.
Oh, it's 100% bad idea. And it is the end of the Congress, which is supposed to be the strongest branch. If you look at the Constitution, because everything's based off of that, the courts and everything, Congress is given the SCOTUS. You know what? You guys make a decision on that. POTUS, you make a decision on that. So we can just fundraise, go on the Sunday shows, continue to, draft or get an exorbitant salary for really doing nothing. And then just kind of continue on with this and put out these.
And by the way, Rick, just to call it out too, like if we're going to be fair, right? Like this technically, right, it's not a violation of air quote norms, right? And the reason being, the only reason that this is even something that's being considered is because we put a rule in place back in the 40s, because FDR ran for 4 terms, right? Up to that point, it wasn't codified. It was just best practice, right? Like I talk about this in the sales world that I work in, contact center space, right? It's sometimes you have your best practices. The best practice was from George Washington to FDR. You would run 2 terms and you would say, I'm out. But no, FDR said, I'm not leaving, right? It was the meme of Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not going to effing leave. And that's more, well, only FDR was sitting in his wheelchair. He wasn't standing up in the sales
He
room.
was wheeling around saying that. He was.
That's right. He was like wheeling around. But like that was when that changed. And I definitely think that, when you kind of look at where we are right now, it technically is not a gross violation or jump away from norms. If anything, it's almost an inevitable outcome, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier.
Exactly. It is the natural end to where we're going. And it kind of feels like it's a race to the bottom at this point to see who can get their guy in who's the last guy in.
Well, the last guy just went ahead and he what did he do? He tried to go after his political opponent using the justice system, and then on the way out just said, I'm going to go pardon my entire family plus a group of a million other folks just because, potential crimes that they could be gone after for retribution. It's like when we talk about the gross violation of norms, we got to get both sides some mirrors, because it's not just one side versus the other. Each side is reacting to the other side, and that's, again, where we are today.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to end this first one. Our next hot take here is just one thing that it's a nice fitting end to the cultural debate that started on Christmas. And it's something that will be studied, I think, in political courses, or should be studied in political courses coming up. Future politicians need to understand this, and that is the rise with social media of a candidate, and how quickly you can rise, how quickly you can fall. And that's the case of Vivek Ramaswamy. He showed up on the scene in the primary. Everybody thought he was young. He was a fast talker. He was slick. He was a salesman. He was all these kind of great things. Great a new leap for conservatives going forward to reach out and show how diverse they were and all other things. He was fine as a surrogate on the campaign trail. He kind of, kept his distance, was a good soldier for Trump. And then on Christmas, him and Elon Musk decided to launch bombs against the American people over the H-1B visa thing. And my stance has been H-1B visas are bad two ways. It's indentured servitude, and it floods your country with people that don't share your same values. It doesn't work for anybody but the people who get low skilled labor for cheap. Vivek doubled down on it, and the mistake he made, when Elon made his points, he was just talking about it from a business perspective. And I'm not trying to, say Elon's better. He still made a mistake. He was like, oh, it's business. Elon. And then Vivek has this long post about Zach Morris and American culture and tiger moms. And nobody wants the prom queen. They want the nerd and all this other stuff. Just stepped all over it, Brian. Goes dark for 10 days, shows up at the inauguration. And then he says, oh, I'm leaving Doge. And everybody's like, nah, you got fired because you thought you were the same as Elon, right? He thought he was on the same footing as Elon. We're both this, that, and the other thing. Elon's a billionaire who is a genius, who is on the same level with Trump. You're not, Vivek. And you found out he's the wide receiver who talked too much in the video room and got cut because he thought he had one good game and he thought he was a superstar now. So I think it's a very fitting end for a guy who just kind of showed up on the scene. And now I think his best bet is to maybe just be a Fox News contributor at this point.
I candidly have a very different take. I think Vivek has been one of the loudest voices and loudest promoters of a true small L libertarian, liberty-based ethic in the GOP stage for the past few years. Absolutely kind of came out of nowhere and really started to take that GOP primary stage by storm, because candidly, he was the only one on that debate stage who was really offering something different of substance. And looking at Doge, I mean, you might be right, man. And we'll never know unless, something happens where the fly in the walls start writing some tell all books. But when it comes down to where Vivek was and where he ended up today, I think there is a little bit of a kernel of truth with what you're outlining there, but also a little bit of also just kind of other stuffs, right? Like Vivek right now is talking through running for governor of Ohio, which he would not be able to be in Doge if that was the case. And candidly, I think that's a way better role for Vivek. Vivek has been a CEO, and just to go back to one of my favorite television shows of all time, think back to when Joan Bennett takes over The Office as CEO. For folks playing on the home game, she was Kathy Bates' character, where all of a sudden Dunder Mifflin's acquired by this company called Sabre, and she's trying to figure out who the next regional manager should be for Dunder Mifflin. Should it still be Michael Scott, or should it be Jim Halpert? And she's like, whoever I choose, I'm going to put the other one back in sales. And then what ends up happening, beforehand, they were both managers, right? Because everybody knows that you need two managers to manage. And that right there is what we have happen here, right? You have two CEOs. And just it's a personality thing, man. Like, two CEOs, they tend to be alphas, right? They tend to be, very, very set in their ways and the way they want to do things. We've seen that with Vivek and how he approaches things. And we all know that with Elon as well. Now, taking a step back a little bit, you did mention that Christmas Day post. And I do want to just take a second, and I'm not trying to go to the defense of Vivek because he doesn't need my defense. But he's right. and yeah, he didn't say it articulately, which is actually kind of surprising, because Vivek is very good at being able to articulate ideas in such a way that they are very palatable for your average person. The problem, though, is that there was too much truth in what Vivek was outlining. Because
what exactly, if you don't mind me, I guess you're going to get to that point. But what was he on the nose with?
Oh, the culture. Like the idea. So this is where I get frustrated. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, for folks who are wondering. And I don't know if y'all remember, back in 2016, we had this quarterback named Tony Romo. And Romo was really good. Like, even though he used to get hurt a lot towards the end of his career, he was still a really good quarterback. And then all of a sudden, I think the first or second preseason game of the year, Tony Romo gets sacked by a defensive lineman from the Seahawks. I think he ends up doing something to his back or his hip or something, like it pinched a nerve, and he was out pretty much for the rest of the foreseeable future. The backup quarterback was Kellen Moore, who broke his ankle in practice. And then all of a sudden we had this third string, 4th round draft pick, nobody, right, named Dak Prescott, who was just shoved into the limelight. Hey, you're the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, right? And all of a sudden, here comes this no-name kid leading America's team. I say that, it hurts to even say it nowadays.
We'll put that in quotation marks. We'll put it in quotation marks.
We'll do that. But he's leading the Dallas Cowboys, and he leads them out to one of the best starting records the Cowboys had in years. And there came a point where Romo was actually cleared to come back and play. And Romo, credit where credit's due, like he went up there on the podium and he said, listen, NFL is a meritocracy, right? It doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter who you are, it's what you're doing, right? And that is so true, not just in the NFL, but in life. And Vivek was calling it out as it is. Life is about a meritocracy. Listen, I'm celebrating today the removal of all these DEI practices from the federal government. Why? Because it's a direct violation of the ideas of a meritocracy. So when you look to what Vivek was outlining in terms of the American work ethic, right? It is indisputable that where we are today versus where we were in the 1970s and the 1980s, it's night and day, specifically when it comes to Americans doing hard jobs that we don't want to do. And that's not to say that one is doing it better versus the other, but just acknowledging the elephant in the room. So I would say that while Vivek, he didn't put it in the nicest way, and he absolutely could have reframed it to be way less confrontational, I think there's a lot of truth to the point he was making. That's not a conversation about H-1Bs. That's a conversation about culture and how do we expect to see ourselves on a national stage and then an international stage find more success. And it's going to be those individuals who embrace the ideas of meritocracy. It's not, the folks who are just shoved into a position because you look a certain way or you believe a certain thing. It's because you've earned it. You've put in the work and you have the outcomes to show on the wall. Like, yeah, I did these things and this is what we accomplished, and being able to carry that forward to accomplish more things. That's, I think, the biggest thing I found in my analysis, at least, that, yeah, Vivek was a little off the mark in how he said it, but in terms of the content and the substance of what he said, I think he was spot on.
So his culture reference, I think, is actually off the mark simply because when you're talking about meritocracy, Vivek, being an Indian American, actually benefits from DEI and being pushed to the front ahead of white Americans or Americans that have actually been here. Secondly, you do make a good point about Americans not wanting to do hard labor, right? There are plenty of stories about that, especially at Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and so forth, being bubble wrapped into that. But there's also the other side of the spectrum where there are no jobs for them to try, right? Where's the steel industry? Where are these industries that their grandparents and their great grandparents who built this union? Where are they? They've all been outsourced to different countries. It is absolutely a fact that blue collar jobs do not exist to the merit or to the extent that they did a generation ago.
But help me out really quick, because this is where I'm a little stuck, right?
Okay.
Why is it? So like, and this almost feels like the argument from the 1900s of like, oh no, we can't have, we can't have automobiles. That's going to put the horse and buggy guy out of business. Yeah, that's called progress in the most true sense of the word.
Building material besides steel.
So you don't know that. Like, I mean, I listen to Tim Pool all the time. I hear what's his name? Ian Cosgrove. He's talking about graphene all the time, right? Like, I don't think it's fair to say that we're.
Please don't talk about graphene on this. If I hear him talk about graphene one more time, I might jump out a window. But anyway,
let me at least make that point though, Rick. Like, there is what we know, right? Mm-hmm. And if you were to tell somebody in 1700 that we are going to be having this, this artificial intelligence type of solution that's going to exist in the year 2025, and it's going to be able to do all these magical, amazing things, he would have looked at you like you're talking about magic, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, very short-sighted of us to look at where we are today, and then in very short context, look back to how things were 10, 15, 30, 50, 100 years ago, and say, well, this is how things were. Why aren't we like that anymore? It's because we're not in the past anymore. We're constantly advancing. Again, we're constantly progressing in the truest sense of that word, not progressivism, but progressing as a society, progressing with technology, and it creates different opportunities. It's not a matter of which opportunities are better and worse. They're different. Like the person who was the steel worker, just because their dad was a steel worker doesn't mean that I need to be a steel worker. What if I can do something different beyond being a steel worker where my value, my skills actually match better? Like my dad was a farmer. I don't want to be a farmer. Like that's not my skill set. I'm a sales guy at heart. I'm a communicator at heart. I'm a messaging expert at heart. And that skill, I'm not discounting the work of a farmer, but my skills, my value would be wholly wasted in that type of a world. That's not to say there's not value in that role, but in terms of where we get the most value and then the most outcome, it's putting ourselves in positions where we can shine, and that is by definition a meritocracy.
True, and I'll make one more point. I'll give you one more point, and then we'll move on, just so we don't get stuck in the mud on this one. Everything you said is correct, but as long as houses need to be built, cars need to be fixed, toilets need to be plunged, all these things need to happen. The technology argument doesn't work. Because yes, AI is great. AI helps make this show possible because it's a one-man band. But as long as those things need to be done, we're probably 5 years away from robots doing farm work. Probably, with the advancement that, and I'm fine with that. I actually have a question I usually bring up to people. If you had a choice, 10,000 immigrants or 10,000 robots for your declining population, which one are you picking? What?
I said, not even a question. 10,000 robots. Give it to me all day long. Yeah,
I knew I liked you on that one. That's because that is the correct answer. But as long as we
Rick, I don't mean to jump in, but like I think you're actually kind of proving my point, right? Like you said, well, the houses, like you need people to build houses. Yes, but we're seeing 3D houses happening now, man. Like that's the thing, is that the way that we viewed is like, oh, a house is this. It's going to change, and it's going to change based on how we build it. And I didn't mean to jump in your point, but like you were actually kind of making the point I was going to make myself in your explanation. Because yeah, things are changing. You're going to see robots take over and start doing the crops and stuff. That's going to replace the low skill immigration types of roles. Like my day job, I sell a lot of contact center seats, right? And what we're seeing is AI is not just going and replacing people, but it's replacing those lower skill, lower barrier to entry jobs. Like, just taking information over the phone. Like, oh, what's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? Why do we need a person doing that? Why not like delegate that to an AI to be able to do that, right? And then let the people do the higher level stuff that's more complicated. That's my point, is that you're right. Those things aren't going away. They are going to change though.
Indeed. And until that time, we should not give those opportunities to those who are not here already. Like when you bring in the H-1Bs, and I know I'm muddling the waters with that. And I think Vivek was trying to make that point. Like you need them because people won't do those jobs. If the H-1Bs don't exist, the jobs have to be filled. And then there's a stigma around from the education system. And I'm about to blow my own point out of the water on this one, that because being a guy in education for 10 years, I actually used to have this argument with other teachers when they said you had to go to a 4-year college. And I told them, no, you can go do a trade. You can go to junior college. You don't have to fulfill those other roles. The idea is that if American culture is so bad, why is everybody else trying throughout the rest of the world trying to get here to be a part of it? That's really the bottom line that I think Vivek made everybody upset with. You know,
I have an answer to that, but it'll go on a whole nother tirade. So
I appreciate that because I think we're getting bogged down on this one, but appreciate the back and forth on that because
that was fun. I like that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And
by the way, I enjoy being able to have these dialogues. I hate and I'm pardon the expression, but like the collective circle of jerks, right? I don't like that. I'd like to be able to have a dialogue where we don't always have to agree, and that's a good thing because we can talk through ideas and figure out what's the best and what can we work on.
When I had a radio show, when I had guests on, people would be like, well, why didn't you use this point? My job is not to get into a screaming match with you.
Right.
My job is to listen to your perspective, and people can agree with it or not. I probably don't agree with it, but my point is I appreciate having on, and we can at least flesh that out. So I've always had that viewpoint, but let's move on. Talking about Trump and the flurry of executive orders and things like that. Just today, the pardoning of pro-lifers ahead of the March for Life. This is what took place earlier.
Set of pardons for peaceful pro-life protesters who were prosecuted by the Biden administration for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Do you know how many?
I believe it's 23, sir.
23 people were prosecuted. They should not have been prosecuted. Many of them are elderly people. They should not have been prosecuted. This is a great honor to sign this.
So the fact is, with the J6ers, with Ross, and now with this, you have a flurry of pardons that Trump is doing when he's first in office, keeping promises. On the one hand, I'm excited because the J6ers, they need to be released. I'm excited because these pro-lifers were being hunted down by an overzealous DOJ. But at the same time, gives me pause, Brian, because once again, we're relying too much on one person in the Oval Office to fix everything. And we shouldn't get to that point of having to wait for your guy to get into office to fix the mistakes of the other guy. It's just a recipe for disaster.
But my man, we are at that point, and that's the part that hurts, right? We have watched for 70 years, and going back to my point earlier about that imperial presidency, right? We've watched specifically since 1945 the power behind the executive branch continuously grow and grow and grow. And it's not a matter of saying, should we or shouldn't we leverage that power, or should we or shouldn't we have that person in that type of role have that type of power? But at the end of the day, the other side is going to use that power, right? And it's almost a fool's errand to sit on our hands and be like, well, we're going to be the moral, ethical people and not use this power. And then 4 years later, 8 years later, 12 years later, whenever it may be that the other side takes over, they then use every single lever at their disposal to not just go after their political opponents, but do some pretty darn awful things, like in this case, throw them in jail. Now, that's a separate conversation of saying, well, how do we fix this, right? This can only be fixed just as the original, the thing we're talking about with 2 terms versus 4 terms or 3 terms for the presidency. It can only be fixed through an act of Congress, right? This goes back to basic civics, right? You have your judicial branch, your legislative branch, and your executive branch. And we call it what? A balance of powers. The executive branch has for years been accumulating more and more and more and more power, to the point where we are today, where I would dare say it is the largest and most powerful branch of our government. And that's to the fault of the legislative and the judicial branch. Why? Because the legislative branch didn't want to do anything. because if they voted one way or another that pissed off their constituents, oh man, now all of a sudden I don't have an election I can go win, right? So I'm just going to wait and I'm going to defer all this to the executive. I'm going to let them go ahead and sign that nice piece of paper, free the J6ers, free the pro-life, folks, whatever it may be, versus actually going out and leading by example, putting tough bills on the docket and voting on it up or down. It's also why we have continuing resolutions, because everybody was afraid of doing single issue votes to actually put their name to paper on saying, yes, I support this, or no, I don't support this. And on the judicial side of the branch, I mean, they've been sitting on their hands for years. Like, we go back to the whole Obamacare, is it a tax or is it a penalty kind of thing, right? Like, they're going in and trying to rewrite laws because they just didn't want to say, no, this isn't constitutional, only if we look at this in a way that it's not a penalty, it's a tax, right? That's not your job. Like, and this is the part where it goes back to, again, the basics of civics. If we actually had three equally balanced groups of power, positions of power in our political branches here, then that would actually make more sense, but we don't. So we can either look at the world as it is or the way we want it to be. I think we should always be in pursuit of what we want it to be but at the same point in time, we cannot ignore where we are today and what we're actually dealing with every single day based on the existing circumstances we find ourselves in.
Well, I think that's why Trump won with the mandate that he did, because people have recognized that fact that you're essentially now in a race between strongmen to your strong man versus theirs, until we either the whole thing collapse or there's a way to hit a reset button one way or the other. But until then, you just got to hope your strong man has enough votes. It becomes essentially tyranny of the majority at that point. And that's what it is until you get back to a true root of federalism and you have, the actual legislature taking hold. You need those two things. And just real quick, as the best way I can apply this to people is when it comes to guns. I hate the fact that we have to nationalize everything. I think the national concealed carry thing, stupid idea. I think reciprocity is fine with red states. Every state had 44 out of the 50 state constitutions have some kind of keep and bear arms in their constitution. And that should be the governing thing. There should be no ATF. There should be no any of these things. So in that case, federalism is really the solution to it. But most people don't even understand what federalism is to actually get to that point. But yeah, you're pretty much in a race between your strongman to theirs. And it's unfortunate in that regard. But let's move on to our next one. Speaking of which, so this is something that everybody. You're right. Promises made, promises kept on this one. And
it only took 70 years. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
We have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy.
I hope every window there's bulletproof.
And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years. For decades.
And you are seeing a more aggressive Trump this term because he promised in 2016, but didn't happen.
Everything will be revealed.
Because now he knows what to do. I think that's the biggest piece, right?
He's also not hampered by the fact that he's trying to get people to vote for him in 4 years.
That's definitely a piece. Yeah.
When you don't have to worry about what people think, you're kind of you can be the bull in the china shop that everybody had been hoping him to be.
Okay. Give that to RFK Jr.
Yes, sir.
He holds it up, and then he essentially says, "Get that to RFK." Which
get that to RFK.
You get that to RFK now. So yeah, he's signed this on Thursday afternoon after the wait of near 61 years. The files of the assassination of 35th President John F. Kennedy were declassified by President Trump. Everything will be revealed, he said, as you just saw. Martin Luther King Jr., which hysterically enough on Monday, Martin Luther King Jr., the FBI put out that fantastic post, and everybody was like, should you really?
Yep.
Kind of like when the ATF tries to celebrate the Waco siege. Yeah.
Yep.
And so, yes, he's declassified it. And this is something that, once again, the curtain is being pulled back on, or hopefully the curtain is being pulled back on a lot of the inner workings of what goes on in DC, in the swamp, in whatever you want to say about it. And the fact that whatever you think about JFK or RFK and MLK, these three transformative figures in American history that we still prop up and we still talk about even to this day, they were murdered for some reason. And yeah, other people have been assassinated. Other people have been attempted to be assassinated. None have stuck around, Brian. And I don't know, you said you're a Cowboy fan. I guess you've been to the Republic of Texas, as I like to call it, the Republic of Texas. You've been to Dealey Plaza and you've taken the tour through the book depository and all those things. And, you know, the American mindset around JFK and MLK and the assassinations and the fact that everything's just hidden and it's just, you can't get access to it. It's just something people are demanding to see.
Well, when you have a government who will tell you with a straight face, if you've got nothing to fear, you've got nothing to hide, right? And they'll tell you that. And then at the same point in time, they keep files like this behind lock and key for decades. Of course it breeds mistrust, right? And this all came to a head, Rick, in 2020 with COVID. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, folks, you're going to hear how we're going from RFK, JFK, and MLK all the way to COVID. But when you have decades of keeping things behind closed doors, it breeds mistrust. And then you fast forward to 2019 into 2020, this novel pandemic, this novel virus hits the world. We're in a global pandemic, and you're not allowed to ask questions. And if you do ask questions, you're going to get censored. Deleted, right? You're going to have entire profiles of individuals removed from social media, from the internet, like they didn't even exist. And then you kind of start to peel back layers of the onion there to say, wait, hold on. This didn't come from a wet market where Chinese folks were making bat soup. This probably came from a lab in China that we're funding. And why are we funding a lab in China? Because we weren't allowed to do it here because of the potential dangers, right? Gain of function research, that was outlawed in 2014, which, when was Anthony Fauci's pardon up until?
For a guy that supposedly embodied the science, it's weird that he took a pardon.
All the way to 2014.
Yeah.
Yep. And that right there, right? All the folks who were kind of like, our government's up to no good. COVID was the ultimate, like, dude, our government sucks. They are absolutely lying to us. I have folks like Anthony Fauci and Rochelle Walensky and Deborah Birx, who are supposed experts in public health, going on the national TV every day telling you, well, you got to wear a mask. Oh, just kidding. Masks don't work. Oh, they work again. Like, what? Oh, you need to get a vaccine. Actually, get 3. And you can't go to work until you get the vaccine. That was the narrative. And people, I don't know if you saw the clip of Andrew Schultz on his podcast freaking out about Anthony Fauci taking the pardon, being like, dude, what's in my arm? What's in my arm? And that's the question that people are asking now. And they were asking it inside their own minds because they were afraid to say it out loud back in 2020. But fast forward to where we are today, and they absolutely feel that I should be asking these questions. And you know what? F you, government, if you think you're going to stop me. And that mentality right there, right, Rick, that has led all the way to where we are today with these files being released. And I'm hoping we get to see into it, and it's not the 14 lines of just black bars just covering up everything. I pray that's not the case. Because that was,
speaking of which, we actually did get I was able to get access to it. So here you go, folks. You're the first ones to see it. Here it is.
There it is. Yep.
Here's the files. Seen here first on RickCast. There you go, folks. Drink it in, as they say.
I swear I didn't know he was going to do that. I wasn't teeing him up, just so we're on the same page.
But you said the whole thing about Fauci and things that people didn't realize because it was happening in real time. They said masks don't work, and then they said masks do. And the reason they did that is because they didn't want people buying the actual masks.
It was a noble lie, Rick.
Yep, they wanted your TikTok dancers and your first responders to get that first, and then the public be damned. You guys can figure it out for yourself. So the fact is, they lied on top of the lie to make sure that people and the manipulation, the arrows in the supermarket, all of these things that people forget about, or the sitting down. My wife and I went to Vegas in 2020, and I kid you not, we were in an open air part of a casino, and we walked in. We had to, I didn't do the mask. I just did the other one that you pull over
fishnet.
your face. Yeah, exactly. I did that. You would wear that throughout the casino, and then you would walk around a glass pane that probably came up to your, like up to my chest. I'd sit down and then I could take it off. And I said, but right over this piece of glass, I have to wear it. So does it stop? Does it go down? Is it like a Douglas dive bomber? Does it take a high altitude? And nobody can answer this because they were all just doing what we were told in that thought experiment. So that's another reason why people are like, everything's got to be told. You got to tell us all this stuff. Why did, what in the deification of JFK, they killed him because of this, they killed him because of that, all these other things that continue to promulgate, they killed MLK because of this, they did it because of RFK, and all that stuff just continues to fester like an open wound instead of just giving people the truth at the time. And the government, your government fears truth, and that's why they have to declassify it. I mean, you could even go, even to 9/11 with Building 7 and all these people that things don't want to talk about, because it's just pack it away. This is your streamlined narrative. I was a history teacher for, like I said before, there's a narrative that has to be told, and it has to be fit within a paragraph of a history book in 10 years. And this is what it's going to be. So let's just move on. And so it's refreshing to see the fact that, hey, we're going to reveal this stuff. We're going to put it out for the public, and they can have the right, because it is your right as a member of this union to know what happened. And then you can make your own decision. Now, of course, the people at Dealey Plaza are going to be mad because they have an entire industry around that place in Dallas about assassinations. There's 400 people giving you different tours. But they'll figure something out.
Well, and Rick, it is the epitome of the infantilization of the American public that people are so tired of, right? Where our government betters are basically acting like what's his name, Jack Nicholson in that movie with Tom Cruise. What the hell is it called?
Where he's like, A Few Good Men.
Yeah, you can't handle the truth, right? Like that's the vibe that our government gives off. And they're like, oh, these little kids, like it's like, mommy and daddy, they're having issues behind the scenes. They can't tell the kids. That's what it feels like. And people are like, dude, we are not children. We are voting Americans. We put you in office. Like, you, at the very least, have a responsibility to be transparent and honest with us and take the little kid gloves off and actually talk to us like we're adults, because we are adults. We are taxpayers. We are voters. We are landowners. Like, start treating me like that, or I am going to get pissed off. Which, I mean, if there's not one big middle finger to the establishment, I mean, look no further than the Donald Trump presidency. I mean, this is the middle finger to that way of thinking, this infantilization of the American public. Trump is ultimately going to be either, the biggest middle finger to that, or I pray something greater, right? Like, open the doors, open the books, let us see everything, stop hiding, and treat us like the adults we are.
And the interesting thing you bring up is you can reveal it, because I hate to say this, 97% of the American public won't care.
Nope.
They won't care. It's like, hey, JFK was killed by a bug. And that's what the actual thing was. He swallowed a bee, and that's what, and people be like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I'm going to work. Because most people, they don't mind Brian being infantilized, because all they want to do is go to work. And this is not, folks, most people don't care about politics. That's fine.
Yep.
They want to go to work. They want to come home. They want to watch football or basketball. And guess what? They have a right to live that way, which is even more upsetting that the government jumps through as many hoops as it does to hide things, because 99% of the time we turn into Dennis Neardy from Jurassic Park. We're like, see, he killed himself. Yeah, nobody cares.
Yep.
Like, nobody cares in that regard. So it's interesting, but it's a big news on that regard. Moving on to the next story that we have in this rapid fire succession. Trump made he went to Davos today, and he decided to tell them that he wants lower interest rates, and he wants the price of oil to go down, and all these other things. And just to give you an idea, got about a minute clip here of Trump kind of scolding. Some people say scolding, some people say he's hanging out with his buddies. You'll be the judge.
And I created the new Department of Government Efficiency. I terminated the ridiculous and incredibly wasteful Green New Deal. I call it the Green New Scam. Withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord and ended the insane and costly electric vehicle mandate. We're going to let people buy the car they want to buy. I declared a national energy emergency, and that's so important, national energy emergency, to unlock the liquid gold under our feet and pave the way for rapid approvals of new energy infrastructure. The United States has the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we're going to use it. Not only will this reduce the cost of virtually all goods and services, it'll make the United States a manufacturing superpower and the world capital of artificial intelligence and crypto.
And so he goes on and talks about all these things at this conference that, you know, anybody that's in this sphere, Brian, Davos and the WEF is always a popular topic. If it's a slow news day, you can always go to the WEF website. And the great Bond villain Schwab, he's always saying, yeah, he's always saying something that you can run a video on. But the idea is he wants to talk to business leaders. He's harshly criticizing Canada, who he still wants to make a state, which is a terrible idea. It's funny in practice to see the Canadians freak out. Terrible idea, terrible idea actually take place. Trump seeks talk with Putin on Ukraine, nuclear arms reduction. He said one of the quotes was, the United States, China, and Russia will take steps to reduce their nuclear arms, which is great in theory, but somehow those nukes always find their way into smaller third world countries for some reason. And then oil prices are turning negative as the S&P rises. And, you know, despite the fact that a lot of people in Trump's cabinet or people that, you know, like a Tulsi Gabbard are WEF people, there's always this public idea that Trump is the great speed bump to Davos, and that's why he should be there, or why we need him in that place. And as you know, as great as some of the stuff he says, some of the stuff he lines up with them pretty much word for word.
Trump's not an ideologue. He's a utilitarian, right? And this is the part where I think a lot of folks, both in the conservative, the libertarian, heck, just the GOP, the MAGA movement in general, you kind of got to get it out of your own heads that Trump believes in stuff. Trump believes in America. He believes in what works for America in his own vision. And he will look at things very much in a black and white, did it work, didn't it work kind of way. And he'll try things, right? And I'm not celebrating that one way or the other. At my core, I'm a small L libertarian. I don't like government doing extra things. I acknowledge the elephant in the room when government has done, XYZ things on a large scale. Sometimes that requires government to peel it back because government is in its own sense the monopoly on violence, right? So the only way to ultimately, at the end of the day, deal with the monopoly on violence is to leverage said monopoly of violence and to scale it back. Now, with that being said, looking at Trump, yeah, he goes to Davos and he's going to say a lot of things we like, and he's going to say some things we don't like. And I think that's par for the course. That's not to say, it's good or bad. It's just, this is who Trump is. You go back to the 80s and 90s, and Trump has been singing a very similar tune. He's talking about tariffs. He's talking about, restoring the American spirit, and it's usually going to something around the world or around the idea of energy or innovation or something like that. And I mean, at the end of the day, he does have a point, though, right? Like, we do need to become an energy superpower in our own regards, because yes, we do have oodles of natural resources that we, for whatever reason, and I mean, the reason is because of our government agencies who have put barriers to actually accessing said natural resources. Like, we need to start using our own solutions, our own supply, instead of relying constantly on all these foreign powers like Saudi Arabia or Russia, like, to get all their crude energy. No, we have it at home. And this kind of goes to, like, I hear folks freak out about the tariff conversation. And I'm like, guys, it's not a matter of, like, I agree from a purely libertarian free market perspective. Tariffs are negative, right? Because they impact not the company or the country you're tariffing, but the end consumer, the person who's buying it. It raises the cost of that end good. But in terms of what is Trump's whole thing, what was the book he wrote? The Art of the Deal, right? And if we have to remember, he's using tariffs as a negotiation tactic. Will he use it in policy? Most likely. But is it always going to be a policy outcome? Absolutely not. It's a lever he's pulling to help make some behavioral changes. And that right there, when we look at, listen, we have the resources. Why are we buying all this overseas? Okay, let's start talking about this. Let's start trying to evaluate things in a different way. I appreciate that. Am I always going to like the outcome from a philosophical perspective? Absolutely not. But I also have to remember we live in this thing called the real world. So I can't, sit there on my hands and be like, well, he didn't do it the way I wanted. That's not fair. Like that's just, that's pardon the expression. Are we allowed to swear on here, Rick? I don't want to get you in
I
trouble.
don't care. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say it's little bitch politics, right? Like this theater kid mentality of like, well, you didn't stick to the script. That wasn't there. You're supposed to say your lines. And by the way, I was in theater for years, so like I always used to get people mad at me because I would always be that guy who'd be like, let's do some improv. Let's have some fun, right? Let's make it more interesting. And then you'd have like one or two of those pencil neck kind of folks who'd be like, that's not in the script. Why are you doing that? You're messing us all up. I'm like, improvise. Let's go. Have some fun. Like, stay on theme. That's what made The Office so fun, by the way. But like, that's what Trump does. Trump improvises, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And that's one thing that people enjoy seeing him on the world stage, because he's just crazy enough to keep these people who are mostly, to go back to our Vivek, these were the people that were the nerds in high school. They were the ones that were part of your model unit, and they had a very strict way of doing things. And when Trump comes in, he's like, I'm just going to drill West Texas. I'm just going to do it tomorrow. We're going to do it.
Is he allowed to do that? That was the question.
Yeah, and people are like, well, no, we pay the people in Texas. We pay them to run the pumps so they don't do oil. You can't do that. He's like, don't care. You know what? Executive order. Now just drill it all. And people just, they don't know what he's going to do next. And partially, it's great to see the machine try to react in real time to it. And especially when you take it to something like Davos, where he's like, yeah, I want oil prices lower. So we're going to drill Alaska. We're going to drill everywhere, and you guys can figure it out. It also takes away that power, like you were saying, to the Saudis and to everybody else, where they have the ability to cripple us. They shouldn't have the ability to cripple us. They shouldn't have any of that. Okay, we have enough oil in West or East Texas for 100 years for us just here in these United States. And we shouldn't be subject to an electric vehicle mandate, because that puts us at the feet of China, who has all the rare earth minerals and all those things. So we shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to have internal combustion vehicles. You can get better range. You can have all these other kinds of stuff. And so it just needs to be keeping these people on their toes. Go.
And Rick, I was just going to say, like, I don't mean to go back to what we were talking about earlier, right? But this is exactly my point. Nuclear energy, right? Like, just because we've only used oil and gas to power ourselves for decades and decades and decades, doesn't mean that there aren't better solutions that are coming down the pike. Nuclear energy is one of the most untapped advancements we've had in technology, and it was all because of scare tactics. I mean, Chernobyl happens, and you have Fukushima over in Japan in the early 2000s.
3 Mile Island here in the U.S. too.
3 Mile Island, you hit me to it. Like those were like oh my gosh, and like those are the exceptions to the rule. Nuclear is one of the safest forms of energy. It's one of the most efficient forms of energy. And oh, by the way, to all my little green friends, lefty friends, it's also one of the most cleanest forms of energy. So no, like don't get stuck on the whole like we need to drill, baby, drill. I agree, but also let fusion, baby, fusion. I don't know, like make things happen in different ways and start doing different ideas. Like I see in the chat we have Mr. Coville here. He and my good buddy Dr. Adrian Bajan talk about the idea that you have construct a law, like let things go as they will go. Things go towards where there is less friction and more freedom, more liberty, both from a scientific but also a sociological standpoint across the board. So let's embrace that and start to say, okay, well, in that spirit, let's embrace nuclear energy because it's actually solving the problem. Let's embrace AI. Let's embrace automation because it's solving a problem and it's allowing us to do other things. There you go. I knew Mr. Kobo would like that.
I'm against every single, just like I'm not against electric cars in theory as a subset of, for some people to have an option. I'm not against nuclear energy either, as the way the French do it with their smaller versions of it instead of the giant plants that we're used, the Springfield nuclear power plant. It doesn't have to be like that. There are more efficient ways to do it that you can actually have these things reach a certain amount of people. And then you have the way, what about the disposal? Well, they're doing things, I believe it's either in in Sweden, which they have ways to deposit the rods in a safe manner, to dispose them in a safe manner. And everybody's still thinking in a 1960s manner about nuclear energy when we're in 2025. So I'm 100% with you in the fact that it's there and it has the ability to make American life even more efficient and even cheaper than it is now, because everybody talks about, well, eggs haven't gone down and the price of these things. Everything bases off of energy. If you bring the cost of energy down, everything, it may not be as fast, but everything will flow in that direction as well, because if it costs less to make something, they do not have to charge as much, and so forth and so forth. So in complete agreement with you on that. I think everybody, I don't classify myself as a libertarian, but if you want to drive an electric car, I don't care. You want to drive a diesel truck, I don't care. the option should be there, especially in a place like these United States, where you have these ability to, right? You can't have a Cybertruck in the middle of Kansas, no matter what Elon Musk says. It just isn't going to work because of the amount of, the amount of time you need to travel between your home to the farm or to whatever. You being a farmer, being the son of a farmer, you understand that Cybertruck's probably not the best mode to try and haul things. You're going to need an F-250 to get these things around, and you're going to need a dually and all the power you can. And people should have that option. And that's one thing that I appreciate Trump in his business sense is just give people the options and let them decide from there in that regard. So it's always good to go from that point. Let's see. We'll move on to our next one here. Migrant raids, arrests that are already happening. And this guy right here, we're just going to go to this video. And this, I don't know, Trump sometimes he's born with a silver spoon in his mouth, because the first day of these ICE raids, he has his unofficial mascot. You couldn't have picked it better.
This Haitian guy
says he's a gang member with 17 criminal convictions.
I mean, if you're a pro-immigration person, a pro-deportation person, all you gotta do is just put this guy's face. And he's in my thumbnail because he is the embodiment
quickly
of
takes
what
down
we've
its
been
next
trying to talk
targets,
about.
including this illegal alien from Brazil who has an Interpol red notice for armed robbery.
And Brian, while this thing goes, the speed at which they were able to quote unquote find these people means that they knew where these people were, and they continued to let them leech off of these communities, leech off of all these other things. When they talk about compassion, all these other things, I don't want to talk about compassion when you're putting these people up while you have homeless Americans. If you have enough money to house these people in, 4-star hotels and you have Americans sitting on the street freezing in this weather and dying of hunger and all this other kind of stuff, you lose me. You're not going to have me in this conversation. And the fact that I could just put this on mute while we play, they're able to, with rapid speed, find these people that are not supposed to be here. It's just, yeah, go.
Rick, you mentioned earlier, right? And here, you know what? I didn't mean for us to come back to this. You raised up something like, why are all these folks...
Let it be the theme of the night. I'm happy with it.
Just keep going back. But you're like, why do they keep coming here, right? And you hinted at it just now. It's not because we are the land of opportunity. It's because it's the land of opportunity for them, right? Like the average American who's suffering and dealing with all this nonsense every single day, the cost of living increasing, the cost of healthcare increasing, you have insurance premiums skyrocketing. Meanwhile, they go to the grocery store and they can barely fill the shopping cart, with $100 versus, what they used to do $100 10 years ago. Like your average everyday person, they're not doing too hot, right? Like you relative compared to where you were in 2019 to today, the average cost of living has skyrocketed. Your average American is absolutely worse off, objectively speaking. But it's not the same for our friends here who are here illegally, right? They're getting the 4-star hotels. They're getting the EBT cards with a seemingly never-ending bank account. Like that is why so many folks are pissed, but also why so many folks are coming over to our country. It's not to take advantage of the American dream or to take advantage of, the meritocracy we talked about earlier. It's because they're getting handouts. And this is where our friends on the left have so just dropped the ball, because in their mind, they're like, well, we're a big global society. These poor people, they need help. And there was this vision of, well, we can create this perfect society by just, giving them stuff and making them feel welcome. No, like I'm old enough to remember, Rick, you mentioned history class, being a history teacher. Like I remember when we were told that America was all about assimilation, right? We were a melting pot, which meant that you take a little bit of Jew, you take a little bit of Italian, you take a little bit of, Ukrainian, you take a little bit of Russian, you take a little bit of Irish, and you mix them all together and you create this really awesome, unique American culture. And that has been in turn replaced with, how dare you, assimilate my culture? My culture is not your costume, Rick, right? Like how many times have we heard that? And now you see, instead of saying, e pluribus unum from many one, now it's like, nope, you celebrate me. And this mentality has fed down to our youngest generations, right? Where all of a sudden you see kids who are going on to the TikToks and they're acting as though like they are, in this first person syndrome because they're the first person player in a game, right? It's all about them instead of thinking about like how these interactions with your society, with your community, with the culture all come together. And I just want to, I hit on culture, and I just want to laser focus on that for a second.
Yep.
Politics is always downstream from culture, right?
100%.
And we have seen over the past like year, especially, the culture has shifted dramatically in the best of ways, because now we're able to start saying, no, this isn't okay. Do that in 2017, you might lose your job. Right? Do that in 2020, you might lose your job. You might go to jail, right? You might get censored online, all these horrible things. So when you're looking at culture and how it pertains to the overarching American experience, I think we're on an upswing, but it speaks to how we got to where we were, because there was a culture very much of like, celebrate your diversity, right? Lead with who you are and why you're different, not about why we're the same. And when you focus on what makes you different, you're of course going to find areas that you disagree and areas of uncomfortability and fighting. And that's just a natural, when worlds collide kind of outcome. But to pretend that that's just okay is exactly why so many folks were so just pissed off over the past few years here and made themselves heard in the voting booth in November.
So the way I looked at that is, you talked about pendulum earlier, and the left has had the dominance on the culture for 20, let's be conservative, 20 plus years, right? They've had
by force, mind you, by force, not by just like it happened.
Yeah.
They got the culture by force.
Yep. And what they did is they tried to put the pedal down, especially in schools and other places, indoctrination centers. And eventually what they failed to realize is that younger generations rebel against whatever the current narrative is. You can call yourself a victim 1,000 times, but if they're coming from kindergarten through 8th grade with pride flags and being told about the 2 genders and 50 different things, you'll see. And as a former teacher, I always laugh when they're like, my students are now making up pronouns in the classroom. Like, you didn't see this coming. You didn't see the fact that you are now
Makes me so
mainstream.
mad.
You didn't think that if you shoved it into films and into TV and into all these other places, that the youngest generation, just by their nature, they rebel, because they go through that phase of life. They're like, yeah, no, we're not doing this anymore. And you started to see that on places like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and others, where they were just going, no, the old joke, yeah, my pronoun is an attack helicopter, right? And we'll see how that goes. And the fact is, the left, as much as they see themselves as guardians of the culture and how they set these things, they didn't see this coming, because we'll keep doing it. We'll go back to the beginning they didn't see the pendulum coming back. Yeah. They thought, we're here forever. We have a dominance on it. We got Obama's, we're going to have Hillary after that. We're just going to control this thing throughout for the next 50, 60 years. The culture is ours. And since the culture is ours, politics is. And the undercurrent said, no, we're just not going to do that. We are going to push back. And the same thing happened with illegal immigration. The fact is, eating the dogs and eating the cats, as much as they wanted to kill it, became one of the funniest memes out there. And once it became a meme, I'm like, Trump's going to absolutely smoke on this issue, because, I think we even had it. I had it as an opening in one of my shows for a while, the song. And so once those things translate, because Americans, we're tough, we like to fight, and we're sarcastic. And if something becomes sarcastic, that means it's become adopted within the mainstream. And once that happened with immigration, and the fact that, the Karen finger wagging of, you have to take care of these people, when they're like, well, my dad doesn't have a job. And, my family can't take care of themselves. What are you talking about? I got to help this other guy out, or I got to help this family out, or I got to watch these people on whatever social media app complaining that their hotel in New York isn't good when it's a 4-star hotel. It's like, no, fam, that's not going to work for you. And so it's an obvious point that anybody with any sense could see coming in that regard, because they shot themselves in the foot with it.
Well, and just going back to something you raised up there, let's just really laser focus on how the left, they really misplayed their hand here. Because you're right, they thought they had this in the bag, right? And let's just go through really quickly how they thought this. You control the educational institutions. So from the moment your child steps foot in pre-K all the way to they graduate high school and then go to college, and then they go through college and they graduate college, and maybe they go and they pursue, a PhD. We will control what your children are learning, and we're going to help formulate how they accept ideas, and also what normal is, right? And then to help continue that when they're adults, we're going to control the media. So when they log on to CNN or to MSNBC or to CBS or to ABC,
or even to Twitter before Elon bought it.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to get there, but they're going to see the same things that they were told back in school, right? Like these are you're a good person if you believe that, and then you hit the nail on the head, right? Then you go onto your social media apps, and it was reaffirmed there through all the control top down from the government on these social media entities, where you have the FBI literally having a desk at Twitter HQ before Elon takes over, where Mark Zuckerberg is admitting on the record now that his team was called by the Biden administration and screamed and yelled at to throttle or remove certain pieces of content, right? So you all of a sudden have all of the social media content being curated in the exact way that it needed to be. And oh, by the way, let's just go ahead and make sure that we put in some DEI practices when we're hiring people. So in terms of, oh, you want a job? Well, you better toe this line. And if you don't, guess what? The people who are hiring you, they're not going to hire you. And oh, by the way, let's make sure that we funnel illegal immigrants into our country. So just in case some of the folks drop off in our plan here, we have an entire base that we can go ahead and use to take over, which, by the way, was considered a conspiracy theory when Tucker Carlson says it. But you rewind a few years beforehand when you have major talking heads like Van Jones, for example, on CNN saying this is actually what's happening, that no longer are you going to have a white culture. No longer are you going to have an American culture. It's going to be this different culture, right? And that's to be celebrated. You call that out back in the late 2010s, early 2020s, and you're called a racist. You're called a bigot for even saying, I'm noticing. And it was all of these different things that they were doing across the board. Of course, they were like, dude, we got this in the bag. We control the education. We control the media. We control the narrative. We control if you want access to your career, your livelihood. And oh, just in case this all doesn't work, we have control to replace you, right? And that was across the board why they were like, we're done. We got this in the bag. And then they got slapped in the face with Donald Trump and a big old like cold glass of reality there.
It was wet too.
It was wet, very wet. That water was wet. Yeah.
And Joe Biden even said it either on the campaign trail or during the first couple months of his presidency. He was like, yeah, we're not going to be white in like 20 years. And that's great. That's a great thing. Because they're all up in their ivory towers, these people that controlled all this. And that's what people don't realize. Your boots on the ground, your everyday Democrats or progressives, they didn't realize, now they may, Nancy Pelosi all the way through every single bureaucrat, every single, CNN now laying off all these people from their jobs, deservedly so. But all these people in these media controlled areas, they were in a safer spot. So if the culture did change, they were going to be insulated from it. So that's why they advocated for it. And even if you did, and that's why and of course I'll die on this hill that none of them, when they were on TV getting that shot in 2020, they were getting B12 shots because none of them actually got the actual experimental thing that.
Except that one lady who got it live on TV. And then like, what was it? Like 2 minutes later, she's like,
she was a nice guinea pig. I'm talking like the important people, right? She was just.
I know. Yeah. It's just funny how like the one person who maybe actually got it live on TV has an adverse reaction. And then do you remember that one female stand-up comedian? And she's on stage. And she's like, and you have these folks who are like, oh, you get the vax and now you have a tracking in your arm and oh, you're going to get all these side effects. Oh, okay, idiot. And then she pauses and she's like, oh. And then she falls and cracks her head in the stage and completely passes out. And people thought she was doing a bit. She wasn't doing a bit. That was literally like her reacting to the vaccine in real time while telling a joke about what an idiot you were if you even challenged the narrative. Poetic justice.
It just writes itself. It just wrote itself.
It really does. It really does.
So yeah, you have all of that. And speaking of social media, speaking of TikTok, we have one last topic. I always like to end on something a little bit lighter because politics. Yeah. So if you really desperately need TikTok, you can just pay $1 million on eBay because you absolutely need the short form videos of TikTok, which tells us a couple things, Brian. A, the Chinese spyware that's in that thing, it is more addictive than YouTube's or Instagrams or anything that Americans can put out. And B, the Chinese will never. They're talking about, oh, well, the Americans are going to buy it. The Chinese are never going to give it up because it is too addictive, and it is perfect for what they're trying to do as far as change culture and track Americans.
I'm torn on the TikTok thing, and I'll tell you why, right? So first and foremost, there has been a narrative, and I just want to quickly dispel this narrative that TikTok is a Chinese-owned app. It was a Chinese-owned app. What we've seen happen over the past like 4 or 5 years is China has actually had to divest quite a bit, to the point I believe it's like 60+% of the company is in the hands of private stakeholders here in the United States. I think I forget what percentage of it was held by like ByteDance, but then they had to do something with Oracle. I forget the specifics, but long story short is that narrative has really, it's gotten legs, right? That this is all Chinese spyware, which there is merit to some of the stuff that TikTok was doing. Absolutely. But I think that has been leveraged to help make the argument really strongly that we need to ban this app. I take a much more free speech approach. I remember during COVID, not being able to communicate on Facebook, watching my YouTube channel that I had worked my ass off to get monetization, get nuked and then throttled after years of building it up. I watched firsthand as my Twitter account, got nuked, and constant suspensions or warnings and stuff. And that's not an America I like to live in, especially when there's very, very, very important stuff that we need to communicate. I know we have other channels. I know we have Twitter. I know we have Facebook. I know we have Gab. I know you have all these different platforms we can go to, to say, well, why do you need to have it on TikTok? It's not a matter of where you need to have it. It's just the ability to have a dialogue. If we're going to have an app like TikTok, I agree. There's a lot of red flags with it. Okay, well then address specifically the red flags. Don't go and ban it outright, because you do two things when you do that. Number one, you force people to dig their heels in, right? And we're seeing this right now with this story, right? It's either it's some type of addiction, or they're digging their heels and saying, I need this iPhone with this app. Number one. But number two, it breeds resentment and it leads folks to go different pathways than we expect. Like, do you think the folks at Twitter and in the U.S. government really think when they were sitting down and working together hand in hand to censor folks on Twitter to talk about COVID, that they expected Elon Musk to literally, say, let that sink in as he walks in through Twitter HQ front doors with an actual sink in his hands? Absolutely not. Did they think that they're going to have Mark Zuckerberg sitting on Joe Rogan in 2025 telling all of the dirty laundry and being like, yeah, the government yelled at us and made us, throttle people's accounts, made us censor people because it didn't fit the narrative? Of course not. And I think when we're looking at TikTok, for all the dangers and all the concerns there are, which I think, we need to talk about, just saying, let's ban this app is not the way to go. I do support the idea of divestiture. Say that word 10 times fast. But at the same point in time, the answer shouldn't be then just like to turn it off, or to not allow, and also like elephant in the room, it's not just TikTok, right? Like it's TikTok and then all TikTok entities. Like I use CapCut to edit my videos for my show. I know there's tons of other video editing tools, but CapCut's really good. I know
it works. Yeah.
Well, I know there's like tons of other like platforms out there that are short form video, but TikTok is the biggest. I have a platform on TikTok. My marketing girl, Magdalene, she handles my account. So I literally don't even have it on my phone. So when she's posting stuff, I don't know what's on there. But I know that I'm reaching more people on there than I am on YouTube. And I'm reaching more people there than I was on Facebook. And that's just because it's a numbers game, right? So I say all that. I definitely have concerns, right? And I've had concerns about TikTok, but just to go in and say, we need to ban this thing outright, it just seems like it's a really, really, really slippery slope.
So understand all that. I was on the ban TikTok thing way before, because when I was doing my old show and way back in the day, I came up with the theory of the TikTok to OnlyFans pipeline. And if you look at the fact that TikTok was the first to encourage young girls to do certain things and were rewarded. I mean, that there was that young girl who was she was the leading TikTok she was making $20 million or some ridiculous amount of money a year, and that encouraged everybody else to try and do this as well, and that has destroyed the entire relationship's ability for men and women. And then when those women peaked, they would be able to do OnlyFans if they had a large enough audience. And then eventually, it actually was called the TikTok to porn pipeline. But because once they faded out of that, it was the only, cause. And so I was always on the fact that TikTok is terrible for society because of what the values that it was teaching based on the algorithm that the Chinese were using. I completely get the free speech argument. I do kind of get the fact that since it is a foreign app, I don't know if it's really under the whole free speech protection that some people, I'm open to the argument that it doesn't have free speech protections because it is owned, even if it's a little bit, it's still owned by a country that is still classified as an enemy of these United States. And the last point I bring up is if they don't pose that much of a threat, why don't they sell it? Why is it such a problem to sell it? And I agree with you. Instagram, just as bad. Facebook is a terrible company with its data practices. Meta is garbage. It is the lowest tier, right? From using references from Moneyball. There's, Twitter, there's Gab, there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's Meta, like as far as the companies that do well with their data sharing practices. And of course, Rumble's on top of all of them. But the fact is, they all do it. But the ability of the TikTok app to do things when they reverse engineered it, how it was able to look into points of contact and data and all these other things.
Oh, yeah. All red flags.
That Facebook can do as well, right? Facebook has the shadow profiles and all that. But there's a difference, even if it's colloquially, which I didn't say right, between Facebook having it and selling it and an adversary of this union having access to biometric data, all these other things, and at the same time controlling how culture reacts, controlling the interaction between men and women, and which is generated into a war of the sexes at younger age. Now you have the rise of the red pills and all that stuff. All of these things, the manosphere, all those things, I believe, were supercharged, let's say, by TikTok and its algorithm promoting, giving women access to, have all this adulation from men all over the world and kind of destroying a lot of the ability for men and women to interact.
Devil's advocate there, right? Because you actually just said something. I'm like, then I guess, is it fair to say that maybe there is kind of some like hidden benefit here because it did jumpstart a counterculture? Right. The more that Gen Z starts to see, girls shaking their buttholes on TikTok, and they're like, dude, what come on, this is gross. Like, stop this. And it turns into this manosphere reaction. Like the culture's changing. And we talk about this here. There's the theme. We're going back to what we started with, right?
Just a circle. That's all it is.
That's right. It's a circle. Like we've seen the culture change for the better. And I think a lot of the culture changing is in fact a reaction to what has been the status quo normalcy. Whether that's, folks saying like, all right, Twitter's going to ban us. We're going to buy Twitter. Right. Or Facebook's going to throttle us and censor us. Okay. We're just not going to use Facebook anymore. We'll use Twitter now. And Mark Zuckerberg being like, oh, come back. And I'll stop. I'll change. Like an abusive boyfriend. But we've seen though, the reaction has gone way to the other end of the spectrum. Now you have podcasts like the Whatever podcast, right? Where basically you have that host, Brian, also bring on folks like Andrew Wilson, and they'll sit there for an hour and roast a table of 7, OnlyFans or TikTok girls. And like, there is an argument to say, is that a good thing? Probably not. But in terms of actually like letting the free market actually help determine the culture, which again, as we talked about, will help in turn lead the politics. What just happened? Trump just won with a very, very strong landmark election. And I think he curried a lot of favor with this Gen Z because he's like, no, I'm going to let you keep talking on TikTok, both the negatives and the positives, because it is a platform, right? And that's just it. It's a platform. Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't go to jail because there's literal CP on Facebook that if you click a link, it's like, hey, this link is probably going to a website that has CP. You should not go here, right? Why is that on Facebook? And should Mark Zuckerberg be held accountable? Fast forward to somebody like a Ross Ulbricht, who just got pardoned by Trump completely and unequivocally for creating an entity called Silk Road, where people were buying and selling drugs over the public internet. Should he have gone to jail because he made a platform? No, I don't think so. So should we be going after China and the owners of TikTok just because it's TikTok? I don't think so. It's a platform. I hear the argument. Actually, Tim Pool makes the argument like, hey, if you were to tell the founders, like, we're going to let the United Kingdom or Great Britain, let bazillion carrier pigeons fly over the continental United States, dropping little leaflets talking about, how great the United Kingdom is and how bad America is, would they allow it? Probably not. And I hear that argument. On the flip side, though, also, could they have imagined AI? Probably not. So it is a situation where I think we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and sometimes deal with some of these harder to grapple truths. I think there's a lot of gray here in a world where we want black and white. But yeah, man, that's kind of my whole like TikTok perspective. But I think there may have been some unintended positive consequences in changing the culture for the better to have, more of that reaction to help get Trump into office again.
Yeah, the benefits to getting Trump into office are clear. And to finish, to put a button on my previous point, at this point, banning TikTok is almost it doesn't do anything, because you now have Reels and you have Shorts and you have all of these other platforms that have emerged. You needed to get TikTok back when it was in its infancy, before it was able to take flight, because now that it's taken flight, you have all of these branches that have come off of it. So banning it now, you can, and that's fine. I kind of still fall on the side of it is a tool for an adversary to use, and unless it wants to divest, and the biggest thing is, hey man, why, you're not going to give up that algorithm, and there's a reason why you don't want to give up that algorithm. That's
the secret sauce.
Yeah, there's something in it, because it works better than anything we can produce on this side of the Pacific right now. We can't keep
digital
up with
cocaine.
no matter what we do. I know Elon's talking about, and we got to stop making Elon our default, like, hey, buy this, buy that. But reviving Vines or whatever this case may be to go back at it. The toothpaste is out of the bottle as far as the destructive force that happened between the sexes. And hopefully that will fix itself over time. We don't know. But it is kind of, in a way, very much a result of just letting it go. I think the Democratic Party wanted TikTok too, because they are kind of buddy-buddy with the Chinese. They were fine with it. They were fine with the destruction between the sexes, because they don't want nuclear families, and they want all these things that have come as a result. So that's why it was allowed to fester and allowed to continue to grow. And you're right. There's with the social media age that's happening, and the way that these things are creating. It's not as simple as shutting off something that's gotten its it's entangled too much. It's now too far into the American culture. You can't rip it out. It's a cancer that's metastasized. So you can try to rip it out of one place, but it's going to be in a bunch of other places that there's no amount of radiation that can get rid of the impact TikTok has had on this culture. So you can ban it, and I wouldn't be upset by it, even though Mag does the same thing for me on there. She's like, yeah, this one won't upload. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't shock me, but it's too late in that regard. This thing is 6 years in typical government fashion, Brian. This bill is 6 years too late to do any real good.
100%. Yep. 100%. Yep. And there's the slippery slope of unintended consequences. I just think that's an area we always gotta keep our eyes to. So yeah, I think that's a good bookmark to that conversation. Yep.
And that's it, folks. That's it for this episode. I mean, we go pretty quick, point by point, man. I try to make sure to keep this to an hour, but we went a little over, and thanks, and I don't mind, because Brian was fantastic talking. We thank you for coming on to the show, folks. If you want to get more of Brian, and why wouldn't you? You can go to his website, briannicholsshow.com. That's briannicholsshow.com. He's also on X and on Rumble and on YouTube, and he's on TikTok if you want to follow him there as well. Brian, is there anything you want to plug before we head out?
For sure. If you do follow me on TikTok, just know I won't follow you back, probably, because I won't even know you're there, because I'm not on there. It's all my marketing team. So if you want to actually reach out to me, find me on X. That's where I am the most interactive. You can find me at Nichols Liberty. Over my shoulder here today, you've seen a lot of these little QR codes flashing. These are my phenomenal sponsors here at the Brian Nichols Show. I have some folks over at Cardio Miracle, who's my studio sponsor. They're doing amazing things, helping create the best heart health supplement in the world. If you want to go ahead and check out some of these folks, go ahead and scan those QR codes. Find the Brian Nichols Show wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook. We're uploading the entire video platform there in its entirety on those different channels. Also, wherever you consume your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the little notification bell so you miss a single time we have a brand new episode going live, aiming for like 2 to 3 episodes per week, as long as I'm able to have enough bandwidth, candidly. Having a little girl and being busy in my day job, plus all the other different ventures I help out on. Man, I wish there was more than 24 hours in a day. I think that's the next thing we got to work on is elongating the day or shrinking up the amount of time it takes to do things. I can do more things throughout the day. But with that being said, no, Rick, this has been a blast. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to having you on the show sometime soon.
I am more than happy. Anytime you extend, I will be there, sir. I appreciate you coming on. And I look forward to it. Well, Brian, we can always have AI do most of our work, and that'll help us stand out the time. One last promo for me, folks, because I can't help but chill for myself, because that's what we do here. You can join me in a couple weeks if you want at the 15th annual Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas. I'm going to be the MC, along with the Bishop of Charleston, John Franklin, Anthony and Rob of Avoiding Babylon, John Edwards, Catholic Rednecks, and Enoch, who will be performing and presenting as well. And one last thing I'd like to show for, please buy my book, The Armed Catholic, The Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense, which is available at Amazon.com. It is the best book about Catholics and firearms ever created. That's actually a thing. So this is RickCast. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and all the fun buttons to help this program go. If you're on the X machine, hit the follow button. God bless everybody. Until that day comes, free Dexter Taylor.